Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the 32nd Annual Greek Economic Summit. And now we are to discuss about the value of information, of intelligence, if you like, both in the context of IT, because we know that information may bring a government to the sky or have it collapse. The same with exchanges, etc. And we've seen that during the pandemic quite loudly. We have with us Professor Pagoulatos. He is the professor in the Athens University of Economics and Business. And we also have Iakovos Kargarotos, Vice Chairman of Papastratos. Thank you very much for being with us. Let us start talking. Do we truly want real information? How easy is it to get it, especially when we have these huge volumes of information flowing in and from uncontrolled channels? The microphone is off. We're living in the era of decentralized information. There was an era in which basic main TV or radio channels and networks would undertake how to inform people, and they of course had to make sure that their information was reliable enough. And whenever they were to divert from reliability, they would lose their credibility. Currently, everyone may turn on the PC and then post something on Facebook, on Twitter, or read the news on Twitter. One might have tens of thousands of followers overnight with no quality control. We are living in an era in which on-time and documented information, what comes as the result of serious journalism, of documentation, of a cross-reference of your sources, coexists with the beliefs of any fanatic, of any person carrying his own bigotry with him or her, etc. And of course, there is this multiplying procedure of fake news and of the conspiracy theories. They multiply a lot, maybe because of the attractiveness of these extreme bits of news. There is some kind of psychological explanation. Many people are inclined to convey a bit of information which is unprecedented, uncontrolled, extreme, and they are inclined to do that because they feel as if they are part of a group of well-informed people. There was a recent survey showing that fake news are being reproduced much faster than real news. They're a bit more attractive. Yes, they are. And there's a lot of people who are willing to reproduce an extreme bit of news. And this creates an uneven playing field, an uneven field of play. We tend to believe that liberal democracy operates on the basis of free information. If we let all opinions flow free to boom, then the truth will come out of that and people will move towards the truth. This is not the case. We know that, and which means that we have a huge burden, and you, Mrs. Tzima, have a huge burden to carry. I'm talking about journalists and trustworthy channels. You have to protect the truth, documentation, the real facts and reality against this sea of fake news and misinformation. Mr. Kargarotos, how easy is it to handle the fake news phenomenon? And let me put it another way. Is it some kind of excuse? Because we have been talking about that before we go live. There are so many sources, but you still have a way to find the truth if you truly want to. If you don't want to be seduced by what is amazing, what is fake. I think that it is a sign of human nature to be seduced by what is simple, what is simplified. And as the professor said, we are inclined to follow that. Let me start with a bit of theory, as we used to say in the university classrooms. Firstly, we have to identify the various levels of dissemination of erroneous misinformation. Let me call it like that. We start with a very simplistic, naive level, which has to do with the information itself. One handpicks this or that bit of information to disseminate. Then the upper level is there's an intentional dissemination of erroneous information, what we call misinformation. And then we have the disinformation. which is the intentional and ill-intended dissemination of erroneous information. So having said all this, we're living the following paradox. We're witnessing the following paradox. We are overwhelmed by such an abundance of information which we actually fail to digest it. It is at the same time equally difficult to recognize the truth. And how does this happen? Where does this happen? It happens in a context of triple, twin, double, quadrupled crisis happening at the same time. We have the climate crisis. We should never forget that. It's here to stay. We have to face it for the coming years. And the offspring of the climate crisis is the biodiversity issue of our planet. Within 100 or 200 years, our planet will be completely different to what it is today and to what we see today. So it's of vital importance to understand that we have to find access to true information. And let us not forget that this comes as a demand by the society itself. In the recent amongst the candidates of prize of the Nobel Prize, one of the candidates was were the supervisors event. Was the events verifiers who offer the service to major TV channels and showing that we don't have the room to be complacent with credibility. So this is a one-way street. I think that the majority of us have understood that in the past 2 years. The COVID pandemic have shown that science may create confusion within the society because society calls for clear messages and trust. So how can we handle this complex and complicated reality? Before we go live, we discussed about the case of a few months ago. There was some information about a drug that could cure you against it could cure people against the COVID. So back then we sent TV crews in Athenian pharmacies, and we've seen thousands of people creating queues outside pharmacies to buy this drug. It was one of the moments I came to realize that things now are really bad. We have all these people, the deniers, and these peculiar beliefs. So some people lose their lives because they have false information about the vaccines themselves. How do we handle that? I would say that all of us who appreciate the value of pluralism and free information in our societies tend to forget the importance of fear, of lack of security, of uncertainty, and the need to grasp on something. Life is so complicated in this extremely multi-layered and multifaceted societies we live in. Every human being has many decisions to take, starting from simple decisions of consumption up to very complicated personal ones, or complicated decisions about the public sphere and public issues, etc. So you have to take a stand about that. So against this cognitive stress created by uncertainty and complexity, quite often giving or providing a simplistic reply is a solution, because it gives you this soothing drug against complexity, because you know that it's very hard to comprehend that, it's very difficult to make up your mind about this or that, but there is a simple solution. For instance, the case of vaccines. Vaccines surfaced, and there are still people uncertain. To a certain extent, maybe they are their excuse for thinking twice about side effects or long-term disease, etc. So if somebody comes and tells him, things are very simple. COVID is something that they created, they manufacture, they want to promote their interests, they want to have the big brother following you, so it will pass. Thankfully, for a minority of people, this is very attractive. Yes, but can't we see that surrounding us? I mean, I'm not trying to vindicate anyone or to acquiesce anyone. No, it's the seduction of paradoxality, says Mr. Pagoulatos. Yes, but it takes some simple observation. Yes, I repeat, it's the seduction of eccentricity, of paradoxality. It's the seduction of thinking that you are one of the very few special ones who understand what's lying behind the scenes, and things are not the way others see it. That's why For some people, for some categories of people, maybe non-well-educated, with no access to science and information, they feel as if it is seduction. The same, equally seductive, is going back to some fairy tale, to the warmth of a comfort zone, of something that we do know, the bad wolf, the good, the evil, etc. And things are so simple. What is encouraging is that, and I read the New York Times today, there's a survey by Gallup Poll on behalf of a major international NGO showing that in 115 countries, 75 to 80% of the public entrusts scientists and science. So I think we're still on the right track, in the sense that overwhelming majorities of our communities and societies do trust the truth, do join forces with those who are able to distinguish empirical reality from fairy tales. The problem is that these minorities who build castles around them to protect their conspiracy theories and the fairy tales are quite loud, they're quite fanatic, and Mrs. Tzima says, we talked about the immunity wall. They create cracks in this wall. Yes, and this is the critical point. Yeah, it's not just about the seduction, perhaps. So they create cracks on what the majority, or in what the majority is trying to build. Mr. Kargarotos. Let me complement to what the professor said. Science creates facts and data, and this should be our driver against this unprecedented global crisis. However, science itself evolves at a slow pace sometimes and creates a degree of complexity that's hard, that makes it hard for simple, ordinary citizens to comprehend. So this is the responsibility of the scientific community to go out public using a more humane and easy to understand language, so that without too many scientific terms, but in using more practical and easy to understand terms to explain what's going on. The pandemic, for instance, we started with a virus. At the beginning, there was a variant. Then there was another variant. What's to come? What's more to come? So, in this context, I think that governments have a very important role to play. Governments are the ones who have to play the dual role of the gatekeeper of true, reliable, and documented knowledge, and on the other hand, to become the intermediaries between the politicians and the society and the scientific community. That's why I'm saying that scientific communities and societies, both in the public and the private sector, should come closer. And that's the responsibility of governments. For instance, in the US, the FDA, the US FDA, please do have a look on how they get input from both communities in order to produce the best possible result. One point about the surveys the professor mentioned before, and it touches also upon our own industry. There was a study the other day entitled "How Deficient Information May Obstruct Our Way to a Smoke-Free World." It was a survey in 25 or 30 countries, Greece amongst them. The findings were the following. A. Greek respondents were correct by 50% on the question, what is the main reason for those diseases related to smoking? Half of them said the burning tobacco and the toxic substances created because of burning. 6 out of 10 said that if there was some serious, robust scientific documentation about these new products and their difference to traditional and conventional cigarettes, then we would have been more easily convinced to switch. And then in the same context, 9 out of 10 of those who said that, yes, we switched and we engaged into novel products, they said that we did that on the basis of well-documented information that we collected. So in all areas, in all industries, in all societies, and that was just a glimpse into our own industry, these things do apply. What are the checks and balances? Can we have checks and balances without being accused of promoting censorship? Because there's a red thin line, right? It's very hard to keep this balance. Some will accuse any effort or any attempt to regulate things as a sign of oppression, of manipulation, etc. I think that from the moment we have labeling of those products, since we have organizations and bodies doing the quality control of certain products, we have to have the same thing about those conveying information. Of course, this brings up the question, who's the one? Are you talking about a public body, an independent authority? We have to discuss about that, because our societies do have bodies that confirm, that validate trustworthy information, and I think there is an inter-party agreement on them, society-wide agreement on them. And I think we can practically find a solution, and we need such a process. The second thing, another thing we need is regulation. For instance, social media and the use of new technologies, the algorithms used in order for some people to multiply their audience and the followers. This is an area in which entrepreneurship had the lead, and then the regulatory framework comes next. So this framework has to take into account concepts such as the algorithm. The algorithm should be publicly controlled, or at least it should be transparent. While data should be protected and closed, of closed type. The third point, whether we can avail ourselves of technology itself, because we live in an era in which fake news haven't yet shown the worst of them. Soon we will have deep fakes. For instance, videos abundantly available presenting figures, events that have never existed. We've seen examples of this technology. I hope that the use of technology will allow us, via perhaps machine learning, to screen trustworthy information against forged and fake news, to the benefit of public audience, public sphere, and for the sake of accessing truth and reality. That's something that our democracies do need, instead of finding resort to oppressive or suppressing means that would let's say, equate to oppression. And of course, in order to avoid authoritative systems in which information is centrally controlled and in which there is no freedom of speech and information, which is the case in the Western free world. Mr. Kargarotos, is this the time to have this under control? I don't know when the time is right to do so. When we feel that the right is now, then it will already be too late. So I'm in favor of moving forward in an inclusive, transparent, and open way. I don't believe that this can happen without the participation of all involved stakeholders, civil society, the governments, the private sector. Everyone should be involved in this debate. I think that this is something that, if we start today, it will take time, no matter what. It's a matter of culture. It's a matter of education of both sides, both the ones providing information and the ones receiving, the recipients of information. And I think this is time-consuming. But unless we can make up our minds and start doing something, perhaps the government should trigger that, or maybe a body, I don't know what. I was thinking maybe ourselves. We try to generate genuine information, and sometimes we're criticized on behalf of others. We try to persuade about the truth, which is not that attractive. It's simple. For instance, drug, vaccine, pandemics. They both exist. They all exist. And I think it's bad for us. So we have maybe to be involved. When talking about us, I would say that yes, we, the physical entities, we have to be involved. We, the business world, have to be involved. And of course, the state. And in the past 5 years, as far as our company is concerned, we have taken a huge turn. We have had a radical transformation underway based on science, based on technology. We used to be a cigarette tobacco company, and now we are an organization laboriously working towards a cigarette-free world. And I think that this transformation may take place at the level of our society as long as we use documented information and scientific knowledge at the forefront so that citizens may take their own sustainable decisions. Thank you very much for your participation, unless you want to say something more. Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe you're one of the lucky